$200,000 a year sounds like the point where money should stop feeling tight. But a household can earn that much, pay every bill on time, and still reach Thursday wondering whether the card can handle groceries. That is not proof that the income is small. It is evidence that income, commitments, and timing are running as three separate systems. In the next few minutes, we will open a hypothetical $200,000 household, trace every major dollar, and build a four-step paycheck operating system. The goal is not to judge the spending. It is to find the exact point where a strong income loses its breathing room. Meet the Carters, a fictional married couple with 2 children. Together they earn $200,000 gross. They are paid bi-weekly, so their income arrives in 26 checks. For this example, assume $11,400 reaches checking in an average month after taxes, payroll deductions, insurance, and retirement contributions. That is an illustration, not a tax calculation. State, benefits, withholding, and filing choices can move it substantially. Their monthly commitments are $4,200 for housing, $2,100 for childcare, $1,450 for 2 vehicles, $900 in debt minimums, $650 for utilities and phones, $1,150 for groceries and household supplies, and $550 for subscriptions, delivery, and other recurring conveniences. The total is $11,000. On paper, $400 remains. That first calculation is the reveal. $200,000 gross sounds abundant, but the household lives on the after-deduction number. Housing, childcare, vehicles, and debt alone consume $8,650, about 76% of the assumed take-home pay. The remaining $2,750 must cover food, utilities, irregular costs, and every surprise. Now compare the headline income with the usable income. $200,000 divided by 12 is about $16,667 of gross income per month, but our assumed deposit is $11,400. Before a single household bill is paid, roughly $5,267 is already outside the checking account. Some of that may be tax withholding. Some may be health insurance, retirement contributions, or other payroll deductions. We are not estimating those categories here. The point is that a household cannot build its spending system around the number on an offer letter. It has to use the amount that actually arrives. This is also why 2 households with the same salary can have completely different experiences. If another fictional household earning $200,000 takes home the same $11,400 but spends $2,800 on housing, has no childcare bill, and owns less expensive vehicles, its large fixed commitments could be thousands lower. The salary did not change. The amount of income already promised before payday did. None of this means the Carter household made foolish choices. A home may support a school decision. Childcare may protect 2 careers. A vehicle may solve a commute. Debt may come from an earlier emergency. The system does not need a villain. It needs an honest map of which choices can change quickly, which can change slowly, and which cannot change this season. A monthly total hide sequence. Suppose one $5,260 paycheck lands Friday. The $4,200 housing payment leaves Monday. Childcare drafts $1,050 Wednesday. Before groceries or fuel, that checking account is already $10 below where it started. The second paycheck will make the month work, but it has not arrived yet. This is the difference between affordability and liquidity. The Carters may afford their year in aggregate and still fail individual weeks. Averages smooth the exact moment the account is under pressure. Bi-weekly pay adds another wrinkle. 26 paychecks are not 2 checks every calendar month. 2 months usually contain a third check. If the household quietly treats those checks as bonus money while annual expenses, insurance renewals, holidays, repairs, school costs, remain unfunded, the apparent windfall simply pays yesterday's omissions. Imagine the first check arrives on January 2 and every 14 days after that. Most months contain 2 deposits, but the calendar eventually places 3 deposits inside a month. A conventional monthly budget often divides annual income by 12, which quietly spreads those 2 extra checks across every month. The bank account does not receive that smooth average. It receives discrete deposits on specific Fridays. For the Carters, assume a normal bi-weekly deposit of $5,260. 2 checks create $10,520 during a typical 2-check month, not the $11,400 annual monthly average we used earlier. The average includes the effect of extra paycheck months. If recurring expenses are close to $11,000, an ordinary 2-check month can feel short even though the annual income appears sufficient. The third checks later in the year repair the average, but they do not help with a February bill due today. That creates two different planning views. The annual view asks whether total income can cover total expenses. The payday view asks whether the right dollars exist on the right dates. A household needs both. Ignoring the annual view can hide an overall deficit. Ignoring the payday view can produce overdrafts, card use, and stress inside an otherwise balanced year. First, calculate the fixed cost load. Divide unavoidable recurring commitments by take-home pay. Here, housing, childcare, cars, debt minimums, utilities, and phones total $9,300. Divided by $11,400, that is roughly 82%. This is not a universal pass-or-fail rule. It is a pressure gauge. When the gauge is high, small spending changes cannot create large breathing room. Second, calculate the lowest projected balance before the next payday. If checking starts at $6,100, the household receives $5,260. Then pays $4,200, $1,050, $450, and $700 before the next deposit. The projected balance is $4,960. But if $4,600 of that amount is reserved for the next set of obligations, the truly available amount is only $360. Third, price the annual irregulars. Assume $2,400 for repairs, $1,800 for gifts and holidays, $1,200 for annual premiums, and $1,800 for school and medical costs. That is $7,200 a year, or $600 a month. Without a sinking fund route, the apparent $400 monthly surplus is actually a $200 deficit. There's a fourth number worth watching even though it does not belong in the headline: the size of the cash buffer. Suppose the Carters want checking never to fall below $2,000. That floor is not available spending. If the bank displays $4,960 and $4,600 is reserved for upcoming obligations, the available amount was already only $360. If the household also needs to rebuild a depleted buffer, even that $360 has a competing job. Now run a sensitivity test. Reducing convenience spending by $200 helps, and it may be the quickest change. But it does not compensate for a $1,450 vehicle category or a $4,200 housing category. If the household refinances nothing, moves nowhere, and childcare cannot change, it should not pretend a subscription audit will create $1,000 of monthly room. The small changes can stop leakage. Structural changes create structural room. For example, assume the household eventually reduces vehicle costs by $500 and convenience spending by $200. Its monthly demand falls from $11,600, including irregular costs, to $10,900. Against the assumed $11,400 take-home average, that produces $500 of room. Route $300 to rebuilding the cash buffer and $200 toward a debt target. That is not a promise about what the household should do. It is a visual demonstration of why changing one large commitment can matter more than chasing 20 tiny transactions. The common mistake is asking, how much is in checking? The account balance mixes at least 4 kinds of money: upcoming bills, flexible spending, annual obligations, and the emergency buffer. A large number can create a false feeling of wealth. A small number can create panic even when the month's obligations are funded. The useful question is, how much is available after everything due before the next paycheck is protected? There are 3 common ways the raw balance creates trouble. First, bill money looks spendable during the quiet days before a draft. Second, a third paycheck feels like a windfall even when annual costs have no funding. Third, a credit card payment appears to solve last month's overspending, while the current month's spending quietly rebuilds the balance. The correction is not to check the account more often. It is to give the balance more structure. One number should represent bills already committed. Another should represent irregular costs accumulating over time. Another should represent the protected floor. Only the remainder should answer the spending question. Step 1. Map. List every obligation by amount and date. Include predictable annual expenses by converting them into per-paycheck amounts. The CFPB publishes cash flow and bill calendar tools built around this timing problem. Start with the next 35 days, not an imaginary perfect year. Put each payday on a calendar. Add housing, childcare, vehicle payments, debt minimums, utilities, insurance, and subscriptions on their actual draft dates. Then add groceries, fuel, and other flexible essentials as planning amounts rather than pretending they occur once per month. Finally, list the irregular costs that are predictable in category even when the exact date is unknown. Step 2. Root. Assign every obligation to the paycheck that funds it. With 26 paychecks, the Carter's $7,200 annual irregular cost target requires about $277 from every check. It should leave spendable checking automatically, just like a bill. Suppose the first $5,260 check must fund $4,200 of housing and $1,050 of childcare. That already exceeds the check by $10. The root cannot work unless part of housing was protected by the previous check. The calendar makes that visible. The previous payday must reserve at least enough to bridge the gap, or the household needs to move a due date, use an existing buffer, or change the underlying expense. This is why paying every bill immediately on payday is not always the same as good routing. Early payment can simplify the calendar, but only if it does not leave the household without cash for obligations that occur before the next deposit. The goal is not to empty checking faster. The goal is to protect each obligation before it becomes urgent. Step 3. Protect. Keep the bill money and sinking fund money visibly separate from available spending. That can mean separate accounts, labeled buckets, or a calendar system that calculates a daily available balance. The mechanism matters less than preventing reserved dollars from impersonating spendable dollars. For a simple implementation, create 3 protected labels: bills before next payday, annual and irregular costs, and buffer floor. The labels may live in separate accounts, a spreadsheet, or software. Do not create so many categories that the system becomes another job. The Carter household does not need 47 envelopes. It needs a reliable boundary between committed money and flexible money. Step 4. Review. Spend 10 minutes on payday checking 4 numbers: cash on hand, obligations before the next check, sinking fund roots, and the available balance. If the available number stays negative, this is no longer a timing-only problem. One of the large commitments must change. Income must increase, or the household needs a structured debt plan. Here is the 10-minute review in order. Confirm the deposit amount. Scan the calendar through the following payday. Verify that every automatic draft has a funding source. Move the planned $277 irregular cost route. Protect the chosen buffer floor. Then calculate the remainder. If the remainder is positive, decide its job before normal spending absorbs it. If it is negative once, identify the unusual cost and the buffer that will cover it. If it is negative repeatedly, stop calling it a surprise. The system has identified a recurring structural gap. After 4 pay cycles, review the assumptions. Groceries may be higher than the planning amount. A subscription may have been forgotten. A due date may consistently collide with the wrong check. Update the route using actual behavior. A useful money system is not a contract with your past guesses. It is a feedback loop. No 4-step system can make an unaffordable set of commitments affordable. Organization reveals the trade-off. It does not erase it. And percentages are diagnostic, not moral rules. Childcare in one season or medical costs in another can rationally make a household look unusual. There is another limitation. The system does not decide which long-term goal deserves priority. A household might value a larger emergency reserve, faster debt payoff, retirement contributions, or near-term flexibility. Those decisions depend on circumstances we do not know. The operating system simply shows what the current commitments leave available for those choices. And the take-home assumption matters. If the Carters actually receive more or less than $11,400 per average month, every ratio changes. Rebuild the example with actual deposits rather than copying these numbers. The method transfers, the answer does not. The Carters did not feel broke because they failed to appreciate their salary. They felt broke because $11,400 of usable income was supporting $11,600 of real monthly demand, and the account balance did not distinguish tomorrow's bills from today's choices. Map the dates, route each paycheck, protect reserved money, review the four numbers, that is the Paycheck operating system. Download the free guide, checklist, and spreadsheet at Exact Money app Paycheck system. If you want the calendar and available balance work maintained for you, the guide also shows how to implement the system in Exact Money. This content is for general financial education. The household and values are hypothetical, and this is not individualized investment, tax, legal, credit, or financial advice.